Hello, Professor Philip and everyone. I am Sister Mai. I belong to the Congregation of Dominican Sisters of Montes. I choose the project on the Epistemology of Descartes. The outline of this project includes Part 1, Introduction, Descartes' background, Part 2, Perfect knowledge, Part 3, Innate ideas, Part 4, The existence of God, Part 5, Meditation method of doubt, Part 6, The dictum cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am, Part 7, Contributions of Descartes. Part 1, Introduction, Descartes' background, his biography. The philosopher René Descartes was born in La Haye, Touraine, France, on March 31, 1596. He died in Stockholm, Sweden, on February 11, 1650. He was a French mathematician, scientist, and philosopher. In addition to abandoning scholastic Aristotelianism, he formulated the first modern version of mind-body dualism, resulting in the mind-body problem, and he promoted the development of a new science based on observation and experimentation, which led to the development of modern philosophy. As a result of his original methodical doubt, he rejected apparent knowledge derived from authority, senses, and developed new epistemic foundations based on the intuition. But when he is thinking, he insists this is expressed in his dictum, I think therefore I am, cogito ergo sum. According to him, there is a fundamental difference between matter, which is extension in three dimensions, and mind, which is thinking. Descartes' metaphysics is rationalist, based on the postulation of innate ideas of mind, matter, and God, while his physics and physiology are mechanistic and empiricist. Descartes seeks to avoid controversy. Based on the new mechanistic model, his philosophy aims to achieve certitude about the nature of the world. He praises the work that has been done in the past, but characterizes his philosophy as more certain and indubitable, submits his philosophy to the faculty for corrections and additions. René Descartes' theory of knowledge was first articulated in his famous work, The Discourse on the Method, but it was fully developed in his later famous work, Meditations on First Philosophy. In Part 2, I say about perfect knowledge. Descartes would not satisfy with the traditional definition of knowledge as justified to belief of Plato. Plato defined knowledge as justified to belief. According to justified to belief's account, I know X because I believe it to be true, and I have some justification for thinking it to be true. So X is in fact true. In other words, it must meet all three conditions in order for a proposition to be considered knowledge, justification, truth, and belief. Descartes is looking for a certain knowledge. As a rationalist, he rejected sense experience as the trustworthy source of knowledge. The foundations of knowledge is certainty. Whole Descartes' epistemology is the quest for certainty. He rejects any idea as uncertain or unreliable. Descartes pursues of certainty because he is convinced that behind the clumsy apparatus of the senses lies the clear intuition of perfect knowledge. In his writing Meditation, first part, Descartes stated that already some years ago I have noticed how many false things I, going into my youth, had admitted as true, and how dubious were whatever things I have afterwards built upon them, and therefore that once in my life all things are fundamentally to be demolished, and that I have to begin again from the first foundations if I were to desire ever to stabilize something firm and lasting in the sciences. He added, because reason already persuades me that assent is to be withheld to no less accurately from the opinions that are not fully certain and indubitable than from the ones that are overly false. Rather will it suffice to reject all by my opinions, if I shall have found any reason for doubting in each one, but because the foundations have been undermined, whatever has been built upon them will collapse spontaneously. With Descartes, human senses is uncertain. Everything that I accepted as being most true up to now, I acquired from the senses or through the senses. However, I have occasionally found that they deceive me, and it is prudent never to trust those who have deceived us, even if only once. Sensory experience, the primary mode of knowledge, is often erroneous and therefore must be doubted. He put all beliefs, ideas, thoughts, and matter in doubt. For Descartes, reason is a native gift. He believed that true knowledge can be attained through the methodical application of reason. Descartes defines perfect knowledge is knowledge without any doubt. He seeks it in the term of doubt. Perfect knowledge is certain, evident, indubitable, infallible, and it was built on a rational foundation, and not on opinion, conjecture, or senses and feelings. Descartes' theory of knowledge, a conviction based on reason that is so strong that no feeling of doubt can change it. Part 3. Innate Idea. Before saying about innate ideas, we need to understand that with Descartes, knowledge can be attained, in contrast with skeptics who hold that we cannot attain knowledge. Descartes considers three kinds of ideas: innate ideas, adventitious ideas, and factitious ideas. The adventitious ideas are ideas from experience. If, for example, you're hearing a noise, seeing the sun, and feeling a fire. The factitious ideas are your invented of sirens and hippogriffs. The innate ideas are your understanding of what a thing is, what truth is, and what thought is. A debate over innate ideas became central to the conflict between rationalists and empiricists in the modern period. According to empiricism, all knowledge is derived from experience, while rationalists believe certain ideas exist independently of experience. Descartes was the leading advocate of the doctrine of innate ideas. According to Descartes, innate ideas are not derived from experience. Instead, they are placed in the human mind by God at birth. As Descartes' rationalism is based solely on reasoning from innate ideas, without any assistance from sensory experience, he establishes certain knowledge about existing things solely on the basis of reasoning from innate ideas. Prove the existence of God. Descartes proved the existence of God by innate idea. According to Descartes, our idea of God is innate and is placed in us by God. And because innate ideas are self-evident, clear and distinct, then our idea of God is also self-evident, clear and distinct. Therefore, God necessarily exists. In the ontology, known as the metaphysical study of the nature of being and existence, Descartes' proof for God's existence goes like this. If something exists, then it must be caused by something else. The only possible ultimate cause is an infinite perfect being. But because God is the only infinite and perfect being, therefore God exists. As Descartes explains, God is supremely good and could not deceive, since this would make him morally imperfect. Descartes provides three steps to prove that God exists, and that he is not a deceiver. The first step is to examine, and demonstrate that the idea of the existence of God, which comes from the intellect, not from the senses or the imagination, is not flawed. Second, because God is perfect, it is impossible for the idea of the perfection to originate from an imperfect cause. such as human beings. So, the idea of God can only be caused by God. In Meditation on First Philosophy, Descartes states, "It is certain that I no less find the idea of God, that is to say, the idea of supremely perfect being, in me than that of any feature or number whatever it is." Finally, if God is infinite perfect, then he will never deceive me, and I will be able to trust my judgment about what is and is not clearly and distinctly perceived. Moreover, Descartes affirms that we have cognitive faculties that God has created, and is not a malicious or deceptive being, and when he will use our reason properly, it cannot fail to lead us to truth. Everything we perceive as wrong in the world, it is not the result of some faulty faculty created by God, but is rather the result of his insufficient knowledge and perfection. Descartes distinguished between three types of knowledge: that which is known by faith alone, such as the Incarnation and the Trinity; that which, while belonging to faith, can nevertheless be discussed and proved by natural reason; and that which has nothing to do with faith, and may be settled by human reason alone, such as the impossibility of squaring the circle. In his explanation of the existence of God, Descartes uses simple reasoning. In order to persuade others, he uses the concept of power. However, I think it is so simple, with little proof, how it is possible for us, the creatures, to think about God, the Creator. It is important to recognize that we are only small parts of a much greater creation. The only certainty we have in regards to God's existence is that he is God, and he is undeceived, based on the amazing world we live in and the creatures that surround us. Descartes was a modern philosopher who had three goals for his philosophy: to find certainty, to fulfill the dream of universal science, and to reconcile science and religion. In order to seek certainty through the truth of science by mathematics, he developed the universal methodic doubt. His purpose is wiping away all his former beliefs and rebuild a convinced foundation for all knowledge, because he realized many faults in the knowledge which he gained in his childhood. As he said in his meditation, "I realized that it was necessary once in the course of my life to demolish everything completely and start again right from the foundation." This method was has reference to thought and means the order which the intellect should observe in its operations for the purpose of attaining certitude. Doubt is called methodic because it is a way to attain certitude. Contrast to skeptics who make doubt as their final word. Descartes advocated this universal method, called also Cartesian doubt, as the beginning of philosophical thinking. Descartes rejected the idea that sense perception conveys accurate information. The goal of Descartes is to distinguish what is true from what is false. In doing so, Descartes employs this famous method of doubt, where he doubts everything believed to be true until certainty is attained. In this process, ideas are put in rigorous tests in determining its certainty. In Part 2 of the discourse on the method known as methodic doubt, that Descartes laid down the rules which he believed is the weight of certainty. His universal methodic doubt includes 4 steps. Firstly, he started to doubt all things which we attain through sense experience, because human sense can deceive us. Doubt to discover a truth that it is impossible to doubt, and build knowledge on the foundation of certitude. Secondly, we analyze each of them through intuition to find those indubitable first principles by breaking down a problem into its simplest parts. Then we synthesize and build our knowledge upon the indubitable first principles that are discovered via intuition. A new knowledge is produced through pure deductive reasoning. Finally, in order to reach certainty, to review the deductive process over and over until it nearly resembles induction, because intuition is more certain than deduction. As Descartes carefully described these 4 steps in his own writings, Descartes in Method, the first was never to accept anything for true which I did not clearly know to be such, that is to say, carefully to avoid precipitancy and prejudice, and to comprise nothing more in my judgment than what was presented to my mind so clearly and distinctly as to exclude all ground of doubt. The second, to divide each of the difficulties under examination into as many parts as possible, and as might be necessary for its adequate solution. The third, to conduct my thoughts in such order that, by commencing with objects the simplest and easiest to know, I might ascend by little and little, and as it were step by step, to the knowledge of more complex, assigning in thought a certain order even to those objects which in their own nature do not stand in a relation of antecedence and sequence, and the last, in every case, to make enumerations so complete and reviews so general that I might be assured that nothing was omitted. In Method 3, Descartes said, "Not that in my mind I imitated the skeptics who doubt, only that they may doubt and seek nothing beyond uncertainty itself, for on the contrary, my desire was simply to find ground of assurance, and cast aside the loose earth and sand, that I may reach the rock or granite." Descartes was not a skeptic because he he used skeptical stance as a tool or method for testing his beliefs. He did not remain in doubt forever, but used doubt as a means to achieve certainty and knowledge. He really was a realist. In philosophy, his universal methodic doubt helped him achieve certitude about the nature of the world according to the new mechanistic model. Then he used his more certain and indubitable philosophy as a means to prove the existence of God and the spiritual soul. We will note that Descartes did not doubt the testimony of consciousness. Descartes believed the capacity of reason to attain truth, but he doubted the results of reasoning. In Part 6, Cogito ergo sum, Descartes challenged all the principles and conclusions of philosophy and science. A methodic doubt is adopted because any other state of mind exposes one to the risk of building upon false principles. For him, the mind assents to many things that are false. The senses, the false reasoning, and the words of others lead to errors. So we must begin by doubting everything that comes from them. Despite the simplicity and clarity of the truth, they are not immune from suspicion. My thought alone remains intact. The reason I think is that I exist, since we pass from one to the other by a simple inspection. The dictum, I think therefore I am, cogito ergo sum. He is directly acquainted with his own acts of thinking. I am therefore precisely only a thinking thing, that is, a mind, soul, intellect, or reason, was the meaning of which was formerly unknown to me, but I am genuine thing, and I truly exist. But what kind of thing? I just said, a thinking thing. Reason is the essence of humanity. For Descartes, the very act of thinking offers a proof of individual human existence. Hence, thought and reason, according to Descartes, must be the essence of humanity. In fact, as Descartes argues, a human person would still be human, even without hands or hair, as long as he has reason. That is the ability to think cryptically, and because only humans have the ability to think, animals therefore don't think. According to Descartes, animals act based on their instinct. We cannot assume that something that thinks does not exist. At the same time, it is thinking. As a result, the thought, I think therefore I exist, is the first and most certain truth. Moreover, a criterion of certainty is needed, and by studying the one unassailable truth, this criterion can be found to be a peculiar clarity of perfection, because I clearly recognize that my doubt or thought involves my existence. I am indubitably certain of it. What I have a clear and distinct idea of is what counts as true for me. In clear and distinct idea, he could not doubt his own existence, because he saw very clear that in order to think, one must exist, and so he accepted as a general rule the test that the things which we conceive very clearly and very distinctly are all true. Part 7. Contributions of Descartes. Descartes' search for certainty and his battle with skepticism have had a profound effect on epistemology. His masterpiece, Discourse on the Method, is one of the most influential works in the history of modern philosophy. Its most important influence is perhaps the first rule that defines the method, which states, "Never to accept anything for true which I did not clearly know to be such." This method of doubt is considered to be the start of modern philosophy. In the Meditation, Descartes, pursuing the method of universal doubt, reaches three main grounds for certainty: the intuition of the necessity of his own existence, cogito ergo sum, the general rule that all that is clearly and distinctly perceived is true, and the veracity of God. Thank you so much for your listening.